For decades, André Rieu stood on stage as the smiling king of the waltz, his violin shimmering under the lights as thousands swayed to his music. But behind that glow was a man who had fought all his life, against a cold childhood, brutal illness, and the fear that one day his body would betray the music that gave him meaning. In 2024, at the height of his career, the applause stopped. Mid-tour, in Mexico City, he collapsed, and for the first time in over 50 years, André Rieu was forced to face the silence he had spent a lifetime escaping. What led to that moment, and what came after, tells the story of a genius whose greatest battle wasn't against critics or fatigue, but against himself. The boy who grew up without love. André Rieu's story doesn't begin on a grand stage surrounded by chandeliers and applause. It begins in a quiet, rigid house in Maastricht, where silence was mistaken for discipline and affection was treated like weakness. Born on October 1, 1949, he entered a world that valued precision over compassion. His father, also named André, was a renowned conductor, a man whose baton commanded orchestras across Europe. But at home, that same baton seemed to command fear. André was the third of 6 children, each expected to follow the rules as if life itself were a metronome, never offbeat, never too loud. Their home, cold and severe, felt more like a rehearsal hall than a family space. His mother, a devout Catholic, carried her faith with iron rather than grace. She believed obedience was love, and that softness spoiled the soul. Praise was rare, laughter rarer. The children's days were filled with practice, chores, and silence. André later said in interviews, not with bitterness but resignation, "My parents didn't love me very much." It wasn't a cry for pity. It was the truth of a boy who had learned early that approval was conditional and joy had a price. In that household, being emotional meant being weak. He grew up feeling unseen, a musician in training, but a son without an audience. Everything changed when he met his first violin teacher, a young woman barely out of adolescence herself. She was gentle, radiant, and, for the first time, patient with him. Her presence softened the edges of his world. She didn't raise her voice or scold him when he made mistakes. Instead, she encouraged him to feel the music, to play not just notes, but emotions. The 5-year-old who had never known tenderness found it in melody. He practiced obsessively, not out of duty, but because it made him feel alive. Through the violin, he discovered a kind of freedom that had never existed within his parents' walls. But love for the violin came with rebellion. As André grew older, his heart leaned toward waltzes, melodies that danced, laughed, and celebrated life. His father saw them as vulgar, not real music. The confrontation between them became inevitable. "I didn't raise you to play waltzes," his father told him, as though joy itself were shameful. Those words stung like a lifelong curse. Every performance André gave in the future was, in some way, a defiance of that sentence, a declaration that music could be both disciplined and joyous. By the time he met Marjorie in the late 1960s, André was ready to escape that emotional prison. She was everything his home wasn't: warm, intelligent, and understanding. When he brought her home, his mother dismissed her coldly, ordering her to leave. That night, André made a choice that would define the rest of his life. He packed his things, walked out of the house, and never looked back. He and Marjorie built a life from scratch, bound not by rules, but by love and respect. His parents never attended a single one of his concerts, not even when stadiums filled with tens of thousands cheered his name. When his father died in 1992, André stayed away from the funeral. The distance between them had become unbridgeable, a silent acknowledgement that their relationship had died long before the man himself. But that void, those years of emotional famine, became the soil from which something extraordinary would grow. The boy who was never told "I love you" would one day give love to millions through music. Every smile in his audience, every waltz that lifted spirits, was a piece of the childhood he never had. What his parents denied him, he gave back to the world, through the only language that ever truly loved him back, music, the birth of a dream. After years of performing under other conductors, André realized something unsettling. The orchestras he played in were lifeless. Musicians chatted about weather and paychecks. Audiences sat stiff and expressionless. It wasn't music. It was routine. Then one evening, during an encore, something happened. The orchestra played a Johann Strauss waltz, and suddenly the room transformed. People smiled, shoulders loosened, the audience swayed. That single moment revealed to André the kind of music he wanted to dedicate his life to, music that made people feel alive. In 1978, at 29, with no savings and a newborn at home, André took a leap that seemed foolish to everyone around him. He founded the Maastricht Salon Orchestra, just a handful of musicians, no fame, no sponsors, no grand concert halls. They played anywhere they could, community centers, border towns, weddings. They didn't chase critics, they chased hearts. And though they often went home with barely enough to cover gas, André felt free. It was during one of those small performances that he played Franz Lehar's Gold and Silver Waltz. Something inside him shifted. It was the moment he realized that joy could be more powerful than perfection. Still, joy didn't pay the bills. The orchestra survived from show to show, often borrowing instruments and struggling to afford travel. Yet André persisted, supported quietly by Marjorie, who handled the bookings, contracts, and financial chaos behind the scenes. When he doubted himself, she was the one who told him, "Sell more records." That simple phrase wasn't about money. It was about belief. She saw what the world didn't yet see, a man capable of reviving a genre everyone had declared dead. By 1987, André was nearly 40 and on the verge of giving up. But he refused to settle. That year, he founded the Johann Strauss Orchestra, 12 musicians united by one radical idea: to bring happiness back into classical music. Their first concert on January 1st, 1988, was small, but it was electric. Gone were the stiff black tuxedos. Instead, there was color, humor, and laughter. Critics sneered and called it musical pornography. But audiences clapped, danced, and cried. For the first time, André Rieu knew he was on the right path. The moment that changed everything. It was May 1995, the UEFA Champions League final in Vienna. Ajax faced Bayern Munich, but halftime belonged to André Rieu. As the orchestra began Shostakovich's waltz number, 50,000 football fans who had never set foot in a concert hall began to sway. On live television, 300 million viewers witnessed the impossible, a classical waltz turning a stadium into a ballroom. Within weeks, André's album, Strauss & Co., shot to #1, staying at the top of the Dutch charts for 19 consecutive weeks. It sold more than 3 million copies worldwide and ignited what music historians later called the Rieu effect. For the first time, a violinist was competing with pop stars. His records outsold Madonna and Bon Jovi in parts of Europe. In Australia, his concerts filled stadiums of over 38,000 people, numbers previously reserved for rock icons. Fans cried, laughed, and danced in the aisles. André had not just revived the waltz, he had rewritten the rules of entertainment. By the early 2000s, his DVDs dominated charts, with 8 of the top 10 in Australia belonging to him. He received over 500 platinum awards, an unheard-of record in classical music, yet the establishment mocked him. Critics called him a showman, a fraud who cheapened art. But André refused to apologize. He didn't care about prestige, he cared about people. "With us," he said, "you don't feel the solemn hush that drives people away." His performances weren't about class or credentials, they were about connection. In 2008, He took that philosophy to its most extravagant level, building a 34 million euro full-scale replica of Vienna's Schönbrunn Palace to use as a mobile concert stage. It had fountains, chandeliers, even horse-drawn carriages. Traditionalists called it madness. But to fans across Europe and Australia, it was magic. For many, it was their first taste of beauty, their first encounter with live classical music. André's empire grew, concerts, recordings, films, and merchandising, all built on the simple idea that joy mattered. He had turned waltzes into a global movement, but as his fame climbed higher, cracks began to show beneath the perfection. The illness that nearly silenced him. In 2010, at 62, André's world spun, literally. A viral infection attacked his vestibular nerve, destroying his balance. For a violinist, balance is everything. One moment he was performing, the next he couldn't stand without the room tilting. Doctors ordered rest, but André panicked. For the first time since childhood, he was powerless. Tours were canceled. The orchestra dispersed. For months he lay in bed, dizzy and disoriented, watching everything he had built teeter on the edge. Then came an unexpected lifeline, a letter from a fan in Australia who had survived the same illness. It contained a list of exercises designed to retrain the inner ear. Desperate, André followed them daily. Slowly, the spinning stopped. By late 2010, he stood again. He returned to the stage not just as a musician, but as a survivor. But something had changed. The illness left a mark, physical and emotional. The man who once moved like the music itself now walked carefully, mindful of every step. Though he smiled for his audience, privately he admitted to friends that the vertigo never fully disappeared. The fear lingered. He began performing with medical teams on standby. Every concert became a test of endurance. Then, in 2016, just when his health seemed stable, tragedy struck again. His beloved trombonist and close friend Ruud Merckx died suddenly during their Christmas tour in Leeds. The loss shattered him. He canceled all remaining shows in London, Birmingham, and Glasgow. He was like a brother, André said later. For the orchestra, it was the first time the music truly stopped. The man who had built a family through music found himself in mourning once more. And when he finally returned to the stage, the joy in his performances carried a new weight, one of loss, gratitude, and the quiet understanding that nothing lasts forever. The collapse in Mexico. By 2024, André Rieu was 74 and unstoppable. He still performed nearly 100 concerts a year, flying across continents, living on adrenaline, but the body has limits. In March 2024, during a 6-concert run in Mexico City, disaster struck. The combination of altitude, jet lag, and flu became unbearable. After his second show, André collapsed backstage. Dizzy, feverish, and unable to stand, he called his wife Marjorie and whispered, "I don't want a first concert day like this ever again." The rest of the tour was canceled. 40,000 tickets were refunded. For a man who prided himself on never missing a performance, it was devastating. He returned to Maastricht shaken. His son Pierre, who had long managed the business side of the orchestra, took over full control. He restructured everything. Fewer flights, longer breaks, only European shows. No more pushing beyond limits. Pierre became not just his manager, but his guardian. Can he do this without breaking? Became the new question behind every tour plan. It was a quiet turning point. André had always lived by motion. Slowing down felt like death. Yet this time, he listened. He accepted the rules his son put in place. Hydration before stage, shorter encores, no post-show greetings until his heart rate normalized. The maestro, who once commanded hundreds with a wave of his bow, now learned to surrender, to care, to rest, to survival. But inside, the old restlessness burned. He missed the chaos, the rush of applause, the illusion of immortality. For the first time, Andre Rieu began to understand what it meant to age in public, the legacy he built, and the silence that awaits. Today, at 75, Andre Rieu still performs, but his concerts feel different, softer, slower, more personal. The waltzes remain, but they carry a tenderness born from pain. Behind him stands Pierre, quietly ensuring the show continues safely. At home, his wife Marjorie, composer, arranger, and the silent architect of his success, still writes music that the world believes came solely from his hands. Their castle in Maastricht, once a symbol of triumph, now doubles as his refuge and office, where he tends to both business and memory. His empire stretches across 80 properties in the Netherlands, built from decades of tireless touring. His philanthropy continues quietly, donating instruments to disabled musicians, offering steel for Notre Dame's restoration, and helping children's orchestras rise from poverty. Yet the man himself remains private, reflective, aware that the next standing ovation might be his last. For Henry Winkler, recovery was slower. The Fonz had made him a star, but it also trapped him. Casting directors couldn't see past the leather jacket. Years passed before he could prove he was more than a catchphrase. Eventually, roles in Scream, Arrested Development, and Barry restored his reputation, but the ghost of Fonzie and the anticlimactic end of Happy Days followed him for life. Winkler later admitted that he still winced when fans brought up the finale. "I wanted them to remember the family, not the left," who played the beloved Mrs. Cunningham, kept working on stage and television, appearing in Gilmore Girls, That 70s projects. Yet fans still quoted her final line from Passages,